So welcome back to Block TV. We're here at Block Show Asia 2019, where day 2 is going off. Plenty of action still to be had here. And I'm joined now, fresh from the podium, by Tom Lee of Fundstrat. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So kick things off here. I mean, you spoke about some interesting points up there on the panel, so I don't want to rehash the same ideas too much. But tell me, what do you see as sort of a prevailing trend in Asian markets, particularly? I want to pull in that focus on Asia in the crypto sphere going into 2020.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sort of threads or themes in Asia. One is, crypto's pretty useful out here, and that's because there's a lot more international travel and remittances, and I think just general need to be able to sort of transport money and store assets safely. But I think it really got a shot of life this year because of what's happened with China, and it's sort of pushed towards mainstream blockchain. So I think it's clearly going to create a lot of momentum around projects built around real Asia-based blockchain and crypto.
Right. So talking about that Chinese, regulatory change, that push coming right from the top from President Xi Jinping himself, do you see China becoming the new blockchain, crypto, digital asset powerhouse of the globe?
I think that's entirely possible. I mean, the two most important economies today, and I'm not exaggerating, are U.S. and China. From a GDP perspective, it's 40% of the wealth. 40% of GDP, but from a sort of household net worth, it's over half of the wealth. So what happens in the U.S. and China are really determining what happens to the rest of the world.
And talking from a general regulator's perspective, how do you feel regulators now that, maybe pushed by Libra, maybe pushed by China, maybe pushed by a number of different factors, but cryptocurrencies are becoming, a bigger focus of a lot of regulators around the world, or something that's at least on their radar. How do you feel, who has the best practice response in terms of countries' approaches and regulators' approaches to different crypto projects?
Well, I think 2019's really highlighted the different approaches that countries are taking. I think the U.S. has become really cautious, really consumer protection oriented, and really not necessarily looking at it through the lens of, hey, this is a national priority, let's transform banking. And of course, on the other end, I'd say that China is really kind of moving forward with, the idea of identity and blockchain to really sort of provide a lot more trust and proof. I think both are good models, and I think over time, those approaches are going to converge. I think what the U.S. is doing by being cautious is actually making its long-term potential in crypto much stronger, because it's going to provide a lot more trust for individuals as the SEC starts to greenlight what can happen.
Okay, that's interesting, because that runs counter to a lot of the narratives that go through the crypto sphere at the moment. Everyone says the US's risks being left behind, falling behind more advanced markets and others that are more willing to innovate and work with this new space.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There's a reason the U.S. has to be cautious. One is, the U.S. has the most to lose. It's $100 trillion of household net worth is in the U.S. That's 1/3 of all global wealth. So, does the SEC want consumers to lose money easily? No. So and the second, of course, is the banking system. The U.S. has the strongest banking system globally. I mean, that's why the most powerful banks are in the U.S. They've got to balance those two sort of priorities. But, do we want Americans to be bleeding edge capital, American individuals, and lose money? Because the reality is 99% of new startups fail. 99% of crypto projects are going to fail. We don't necessarily need the Americans to be on the front line of that. That's, I think, the SEC's view.
Some would argue, and this argument was actually made by Mark Zuckerberg himself when he was speaking before Congress on the Libra hearings, and he said that American infrastructure is falling behind. It's not laying the groundwork for potential innovations. Obviously, there he's referring to his own baby, the Libra project, but in terms of many of those sort of arguments, the US arguably missed the boat on the mobile payments sector that has taken off across Asia and many parts of Africa as well. Is that an argument you can see has any merit?
I mean, there's pluses and minuses. I spent most of my career studying wireless and internet, in '93, and for those who are historians of the wireless industry, the U.S. forged its own path. I mean, there were two major differences. One was the U.S. did not do calling party pays. which today people forget, but that's a big deal. And the second was the U.S. was pursuing CDMA and spread spectrum technology when the rest of the world was using GSM. Looking back, that was sort of the right path. CDMA is really the basis for what we see today as modern LTE and 5G, and U.S. not charging callers to make recipients of a call to pay. It turns out that's been pretty brilliant. So.
Libra and Telegram, do you think the US is making the right stance, being quite sort of harsh and firm on those particular projects?
It's the SEC is not weighed in on Libra. What we've seen is blowback from Congress and, non-U.S. central bankers. I'm surprised at that because, Libra hasn't even launched yet. But I think ultimately it's really more of a story of how regulatory, expertise involving regulators very early, getting buy-in, which Facebook probably didn't do properly, is the reason Libra's having problems. I think the project isn't fatally flawed, so I think it'll be successful. And then with Telegram, I can see why people think it's unfair, because you look at what happened with EOS versus Telegram, and one's essentially being stopped before it's even out of the gates. I can't comment individually on the merits of this, but I think the SEC's overall approach has been spot on. I think they're really trying to protect, U.S. individuals, and that's important.
Certainly it is. Now, looking forward, we come to the end of 2019, looking forward to 2020. You're known around the cryptosphere as the man with the crystal ball. What are sort of major trends you're looking out for in the next year?
I think there's a lot of tailwinds building in 2020. So let's say 2019 was a year where there was a lot of dry powder put to work that helped Bitcoin's price rise, and there was potential for institutional infrastructure to be rolled out, and it happened with Bakkt. A lot of this momentum is going to carry into 2020. We have the halvening. I think we have a better chance for mainstream adoption to grow. We're clearly seeing that from Asia. And I think in the U.S., it's really because I think as Bakkt and Fidelity really gain some momentum, there's going to be more trust and more adoption. So incrementally, the ball's moving forward, and that's bullish.
Do you have a price prediction for 2020?
The price will be different than it is today.
Fair enough. All right, Tom Lee, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on BLOCKTV, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the news coming out of Block Show Asia 2019. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.